we went to Celoron, and there we took in all of the rides, and so we had a good day, and we took our food and picnicked, and then we could go ahead and for a nickel you could shoot down rabbits or you shoot down something. There were all kinds of little booths that they still have at carnivals, I understand.
Right.
I haven't seen any for a long time.
Oh, they still do?
They still do, yes.
They used to go swimming too, there, and they had these things that you could ride down, way out in the water. Some of them would belly whack down, and some would, the girl would be straddled with the guy's back, and he'd probably show her off.
Practically lived in Celoron Park. They used to go down, they had a stock company in this theater that was there, and they changed the show every week, and every week we had to be there to see that show. And it was, sometimes they'd have run a movie, it was continuous, and we had to keep up with the continuation of that so we didn't miss any of it.
The one in Celoron, which was established in the early 1890s, was a beautiful piece of well, it was a theater, and it had a drop curtain, and it had all kinds of scenery changes. The pictures, I've seen pictures of that, and red gold plush decoration in white and gold, and then red plush seats with balconies. And I imagine that's how the houses here in Jamestown were also. Just a great deal of money was spent on those, and of course they had changing shows every week. They would have live entertainments in musicals and dramas. A lot of that kind of thing went on in the last half of the last century. The people could go really be entertained.
We'd go down there, and the streetcar used to run right clear out to the end of the steamboat dock and carry passengers out there, and there was always an enormous crowd down there. And they had all kind of bands that come there, all the famous bands. And some of the New York Stock Company used to play in there, and then in the Pier Ballroom, they turned that into a big dance hall. And they used to have a big ball that hung from the ceiling. It was all made of little pieces of glass put together. And they turned the lights on that and shut the other lights off. And it'd be just like rainbows running all over the floor, what they call the moonlight dance. And that place was a beautiful place.
Celoron Park was fantastic in its day, and that's, I'm thinking, right around the turn of the century. There was a Ferris wheel, there was roller coaster rides. You could get in your bathing suit and go down the water slides. I think water slides are new for 1980. They're not, they were around a long time ago. Just fun things. They'd have music. They had a fountain that had lights and different colors that they would turn on at night. They had fireworks. They had a mini zoo. There was just a lot of things to keep people busy. There were baseball games. They had a baseball field out there, that kind of thing. So, you could spend the whole day there and just be really pleased with what you saw.
Celoron Park was one of those parks that was called a trolley park, simply because it was easy for people to get to, a very short ride on the trolley. It was patronized very largely, from what I have been able to find out, by people from Jamestown and the surrounding area. It was not terribly expensive. If you could afford the price of a trolley ride or a steamboat ride from Jamestown, that's all you needed. You didn't have to buy admission to the park. If you wanted to ride the giant Ferris wheel or the roller coaster types they had, some of those special events, it would cost 10 cents. But otherwise, you could sit in the midway and watch trapeze artists and balloon ascension, fireworks, band concerts, all sorts of entertainments, just by sitting there and paying nothing.
Celoron Park was an amusement park. It was the Coney Island of western New York, and that was established by the Broadhead family, who owned the steamboat lines and who owned some of those trolley lines also, along with some other things in the city of Jamestown, other industries. Chautauqua Lake was a tourist mecca, just as it is now, but people came and stayed for the whole summer. Just the Broadhead family, the two sons of William, Almed and Sheldon, who saw this tourist trade all around Chautauqua Lake at Chautauqua Institution, which was established at this time, and saw the need for these people of having something to do to, besides to sit around and chat or play cards or whatever they would do. So they established this huge amusement park at Celoron. That they had the Ferris wheel, the Phoenix wheel as it was called, and when it left Celoron Park, when that was closed finally, that Phoenix wheel went out to Sacramento, California, and was there until, it's perhaps 5 years ago or so that it burned there in California at the amusement park where it was there. But that was a huge thing. There were all sorts of the typical rides that any amusement park has. Early on, there was a lot of vaudeville. There was a theater there that brought in a lot of vaudeville.
I'll tell you, in those days, the factories had policies of providing tickets for their workers. And then their workers could go there and take free rides and all kinds of things with these tickets. All the families would meet there, and we had one grand big time. It was really fun. They did this for years, these factories. And it was a sort of a bonus, I suppose, or a way of keeping the people happy with low pay. I don't know. But I know the pay was pretty low.
What do you say? If I do, let me lose, I don't care. If I do, let me lose, I don't care. Losing dollars, trying to do one time. He can't afford on love sometimes.
In the younger days, they had 4 streetcars running around Jamestown. There was 2 big trolley cars. One of them was the JNW. It used to run from Jamestown as far as Westville, carrying baggage and passengers, and they met the trains in Westville. And the Chautauqua traction, which ran up on the south side of the lake, that went as far as Mayville and carried the people up to the courthouse and the farmers that lived along the road. And in Jamestown itself, we had 2 trolleys here. One little short trolley that ran from Jamestown up as far as Asheville and turned around and came back. And then we had a little tiny one that used to go up and down the loop, which was up North Main Street past the cemetery and came back down Lakeview Avenue.
Now, was that horse-drawn or electric at that point?
All electric. Broadhead had, at that time, had built the power plant, and they furnished the power for the electricity of Jamestown and up as far as Celoron. And then that one big trolley, after it came back from Mayville, it went on through to Warren, Pennsylvania, and came back.
You mentioned the train, and are you using train and railway synonymously? Or are you interchanging those terms? You said the train ran around the lake.
Yes, the one that ran on the east side of the lake at the earliest times was a steam train. The one that the Chautauqua traction line that ran around the west side of the lake was an electric train, an extension actually of the Jamestown Street Railway Company, which was, those were electric cars, trolleys actually.
Trolley system was very, very well developed, and it tied in. Eventually the Broadhead family owned most of the trolley systems and the steamboat system, so that's why they even had Celoron Park, was to encourage people to use the trolleys and the steamers and to get more business, build up more business. So you could pretty much get all over town just hopping a trolley whenever you wanted to.
Through the winter also?
Oh yeah, through the winter. It was a little cold, nippy, but yeah, you could even do it in the wintertime.
And they were open cars pulled by horses?
The first ones were, and then eventually it was, electricity was used as a means of power, and the cars were closed. They even had some double-decker cars that went out to Celoron Park.
These streetcars they run up there is what they call the open cars. The seats were all open with just a rail on either side to keep people from falling off. And then they had one streetcar that ran up there. They had an upstairs to it and a winding stairway that went up to get to the second floor. They called the double-decker. And kids delighted in getting up there to ride on that.
Part of this whole thing, too, are the steamboats that were on Chautauqua Lake, which also helped connect this whole transportation thing, because some people would take the steamboat, say, from Celoron Park up to Mayville, taking the trolley from Jamestown to Celoron and then picking up one of the steamboats at the Celoron dock, and the trolley line ran all the way out to the end of the dock at Celoron Park, so that you could just climb off the trolley and ride on, just walk a few feet across the dock that was there and ride onto the steamboat, and then travel up to, say, Mayville or someplace in between, Bemis or whatever.
And you have to recognize how important that was. For instance, the dock at Mayville and at Celoron, you know, the trains or the trolleys could pull right out on the dock. So you could leave Pittsburgh by train, come right out on the dock at Mayville, get off the train, onto the steamboat, and down to the hotel where you were staying for the summer.
I really miss the trains. I really do. I think in this industrialization that we have and in this computerized era, we really have missed something, and that is the train. They were really nice.
When looking through old photographs, you find that people took pictures of things that they were really proud of. After polishing the chrome, or wood in this case, Jamestown's firefighters would stand with their rigs, smile, and say, "Ain't she sweet?"
Chautauqua Lake also made ice in the wintertime. I kept the people that were busy in the summertime with the tourists. That was what their occupation was most of the time in the wintertime. And they had a whole system for cutting it, harvesting it, conveyor belts that got it up into the ice houses. Then they'd store it with straw to pack it and insulate it, and then of course as soon as they needed it, when it got to be spring and summer, they'd unpack it and ship it down to Pittsburgh, up to Buffalo, to Cleveland, wherever it was needed.
They cut a canal from the bank out to the deepest part of the lake where they were cutting, maybe about 5 to 6 feet wide. And then they'd saw both sides of that and saw down through so they got it into blocks. And then the men that worked there would stand on either side of the canal. They had long pike poles with a long iron spike in the end of it. And they'd gradually push these things up until they got it almost to the bank, where they had a revolving chain there that would catch that ice and haul it right up into the ice house. And when they got it up in there, they made a layer of it across, and then they'd pack sawdust on that, and then another layer of ice, and pack more sawdust until they got the ice house filled. And sometimes they took the horses out on there to help push those cakes up.
Whistle blow. Thought I heard that steamboat whistle blow. Blowed like she'd never blowed before.
These graduates, or to be, would take the boat and go up to Midway, and on the way, it would be in the evening, maybe if I remember correctly, maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we would dance and eat on the boat, and there would be the dance band, of course. We had a very good time, and they called this the Vigil. And there would be a few programs, very simple, which I can't remember, just simple things, And then we would go on and then circle the lake. I don't think we went to Midway at that time. I'm not positive about it. And then I don't think we got off the boat. I think we just simply turned around up to the Mayville, close to Mayville, and back. It took a long, long time. It took the whole evening. We'd get off. It would be quite late.
My family moved here in 1946. We moved to a home on the shores of the lake in Lakewood. And at that time, the last remaining steamer on the lake, the city of Jamestown, was still in operation. So frequently I used to sit in my dock and watch the city of Jamestown go by, and it was kind of a great experience for me because, that's there's so much color and character and romance to steamboats. It's just a fascinating sight for almost anyone who watches it. When was the absolute heyday of the steamboats? Well, I'd say it came shortly after President Grant's visit and the beginning of Chautauqua Institution. In 1879 through 1881, 82, there were a half dozen of the major steamboats built. Remember, we had the early steamboats were flat-bottom paddle wheelers because we didn't have big docks that they could pull into, so they had to come right into shore. But they were very slow. So the latter-day fleet, really the fleet that we call the Great White Fleet, was built in the 1879 through 1891. And these were V-hull, fast, deep-water boats, and we could use them because we had these huge piers, big docks coming out into the lake so they didn't have to come right into shore. In some cases, channels were dug to accommodate them, too. So I'd say the heyday of the fleet really took place in the 1880s, 1890s, right up through 1892 when the Broadhead brothers bought the 2 competing fleets on the lake. We had the Red Stack Line and the Black Stack Line, and they used to have fantastic competitions. Price wars. I mean, they were tough people. Occasionally they would shoot at each other. There were some interesting things that went on. I mean, we think business is competitive today. It was just as competitive then. But in 1892, the Broadhead brothers brought both the Red Stack Line and the Black Stack Line and combined the 2 into one fleet. And that was the salvation of the steamboating that went on in a very substantial manner from then through the early part of the 1900s. And around 1910 started going downhill, 1915 started going downhill, until the fleet was out of business in 1925.
I rode all the steamboats. We used to go from Jamestown to Mayville and back for 80 cents. Sunday afternoon, that was a special treat to get on there, and they had a little German band that would play on the boat all the way from Jamestown to Mayville and back. And people just crowded the boat ride just to hear that band play.
People were such great promoters in those times, too.
How's that?
Well, see, an entrepreneur would build a steamboat. He would immediately make a connection with a railroad line, and he would name the steamboat after one of the main people involved with the railroad. Okay, and that would last for a year or two, just to get that monetary connection between railroad passengers and steamboat passengers. I mean, our people in those days were such great promoters that after they would make the connection with the railroads, they would name the steamboats after the great cities where tourists came from. The latter-day fleet, the Great White Fleet, we had the city of Pittsburgh, the city of Chicago, the city of Cleveland, the city of New York, all of the major cities around here where people could easily get to Lake Chautauqua.
They weren't just being gracious.
I think they were being a little bit gracious, but I guess perhaps the monetary factor was rather important also.
At one particular time, the 1880s and 90s, there were 7 very large steamboats, well over 100 feet long. This does not include the one called the Jamestown, which had 4 decks in its final years, would carry something like 3,000 to 5,000 people. And it burned in 1891. That was the end of it. That was the very largest one that they had.
Where did they get 3,000 to 5,000 people to ride on?
Well, apparently people flocked here from in the country in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Buffalo. Excursions would come from Buffalo, from the cities of Pittsburgh and Cleveland, Buffalo also. That's the only place I can think, the only way I can think they could get that many people. But it was for the special excursions. I look at the pictures and I see the 7 huge steamers plus many smaller ones all drawn up there, and I don't quite see how they all fit, because it doesn't look like there's that much space, and yet people tell me that that was the size of the boat landing, because I thought maybe that it had been a bigger body of water that they had been able to use, but they say it was that size. It hasn't been filled in or anything.
Unbelievable, isn't it? It really hasn't changed that much either. I mean, there's probably more room down there right now than there was before. They could actually turn in the boat landing. They sort of had to winch them around on the docks. You know, you would tie one of the big lines to one of the huge dock posts and swing the bow out, and then work the boat around in that manner. You couldn't actually just turn in the circle. It's not that large.
You know, it's incredible when you see pictures of it to realize that that's where the steamboats landed. And I look at it and I think, how could they possibly have fit that many steamers? But they all lined up. People would actually take the trolley down to the boat landing to get on the steamboat, and then the steamers would, you know, they all had their scheduled times. There was some boat building done there. The repairs were done there during the winter time down in that area. And then the steamer would take off down the outlet. I don't know, I think there are like 9 curves. And you can see where it was very difficult to navigate all the way, just like this, the whole way down. And it did take them a while to get out, actually out into Chautauqua Lake from there.
Thought I heard that steamboat whistle blow. Thought I heard that steamboat whistle blow. Blowed like she'd never blowed before.
Jamestown of today is quite different than that of the turn of the century. Many of the things that you've just seen and heard about are no longer with us. The obvious question is why? The answers? Well, they're not quite as black and white as the photos of that period.
At one time, it was thought that the Depression did in that wood furniture industry. We discovered that the wood furniture industry had gone into decline before the great crash in 1929. Many of those small family-owned businesses were already going out of business or being absorbed by larger companies. And the reason for that was technology. They were very small. They had very little capital investment behind them. Technology was increasing. They did not have the capital to invest in the technology that was necessary. They relied on hand labor, and that was becoming obsolete. You simply could not produce the goods by hand labor economically. You had to do it by machinery. They could not invest in that machinery. And in some instances, say the father who had started the business originally, he had died or retired. The sons had no interest in, or there were no sons to continue the business, or those had no interest in continuing it, so it just fell by the wayside.
When was the downfall of Celoron Park, do you know?
Oh, I think it happened gradually, and I think this is what happened basically throughout all of around Chautauqua Lake. We had these very large hotels, and once the automobile became popular and most people had a car, they could go any place they wanted. They weren't restricted by railroads, steamers, trolleys, and could only go where they could get. They could go any place they wanted, and I think this is primarily they wanted to go farther. They could go farther, and that's what they did. They didn't have to just stick to the same places they had gone to.
I think you can trace that, directly to the tremendous development of the railroad system. We, at one time had trains around both sides of the lake, and very particularly to the automobile. Once the automobile came out and roads started being built around the lake, and it was easier to get around, and you could do it year-round, the steamboats started going downhill until eventually in 1925, the Broadhead brothers, who were the salvation of the steamboat fleet on this lake in the early part of the century, took the entire fleet out of commission. From that point on, the city of Jamestown was sold to private individuals, and that particular boat maintained the tradition right through 1963, which was the last regularly scheduled run, and 1967 when it actually made its last run on the lake.